Welcome back to another episode of the Even Your Dynasty Show. On today's video, we are going to talk about one of my personal favorite players in all of baseball that's, not on the Giants, and that's Kyle Tucker, who is apparently available via trade by the Astros. Their GM said that they are going to listen on offers for him. Now, being willing to listen and actively shopping a player, those are not always the same thing. So we'll see, kind of what it would end up taking to get Kyle Tucker. But it's out there. And Joel Sherman reported that the Giants are one of the, four teams kind of most aggressively pursuing Kyle Tucker. So, and he did add some notes in his post about that, about what the Astros may be looking for. So when I get to kind of, what it might take to get that trade completed, we'll discuss that in a little bit. But before that, if you guys do enjoy the content, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're coming up on 1,200 subscribers, which is awesome. You guys are amazing. Appreciate all the support. For those of you that didn't see it, we did interview Giants prospect Charlie Zacconi on Monday night. So go under the lives. You can find that video there. He was a really awesome guest. He was a fun guy. We are going to be doing another live show on Friday night, hopefully with another guest, but I can't announce that until we're going to try and confirm it on Friday morning. So keep an eye out. If we have a guest there, it'll be an awesome show. Otherwise, we'll still do the live and we'll still have a ton of fun. So starting off with Kyle Tucker, a little bit about him. He's played his full career in Houston. He turns 28 in January, so he's entering his age 28 season. He's under contract for only one more year, so it is a potential rental piece, but he is not a Scott Boras client. He is actually with XL Sports Management. So there is always a possibility that you can get an extension done. And one thing you can do with these trades, as long as you get permission from the team that, has the guy, you can potentially pre-negotiate an extension and, or at least, gauge willingness is the way I would look at it. Find out if it's, is he a Juan Soto or Corbin Burns that when they got traded, they were pretty open and adamant that they were going to hit free agency, and there was basically nothing the teams that traded for them could do about that. They were going to hit free agency. Not every player's like that. We might look at a Kyle Tucker and his skills and say this is a guy that is probably going to want to test free agency, but you just don't know. So I'd be, trying to at least gauge his his interest and willingness to an extension. Now you're going to overpay like crazy. Like you're going to have to put an offer out there to get him to forego free agency. But you got to, I think it's responsible to at least find out if there is an openness there from Kyle Tucker to extend with a team, because you just don't know. Mookie Betts, I would make a strong argument that Mookie Betts was a better player at the time he got traded from Boston to LA and had 1 year left on his deal, and he signed an extension. So you just don't know, that's the point. But some more background. He's a 3-time All-Star, Gold Glover in 2022 in right field. He finished top 5 in the MVP voting in 2023. 2024, he was limited to 78 games because he fractured his shin fouling a ball off it in June. So, kind of limited there, but he still put up kind of some stupid numbers last season. So he's arbitration eligible this season, being, his last year before free agency. There hasn't been an agreement yet, but he's estimated to make about $16.7 million. So performance-wise, from 2021 to 2023, he had a 278 average, an 870 OPS, 139 OPS plus. For those of you that don't know, it means he was 39% better than league average. Averaged 30 home runs and 67 extra base hits a year. Averaged 104 RBIs a year and averaged 23 stolen bases a year, which is actually kind of funny because he was like bottom third in sprint speed percentile. So he must get great jumps when he's stealing bags. In 2024, he only played 78 games, as I mentioned, hit 289, a 993 OPS. He had a 181 OPS plus, still hit 23 home runs with 39 extra base hits, 49 RBIs, 11 stolen bases. So he was well on his way to a, potential 30-20 season, maybe even a 40-20 season, had he not had the injury. Um, actually walked more than he struck out last season. He has a career 16% strikeout rate and a career 10.8% walk rate. So kind of where would Kyle fit? I mean, the obvious is you put him in a corner outfield. His defensive metrics kind of took a step back last season. He obviously won a Gold Glove a few years ago. Houston's a lot easier to play right field than Oracle Park. I would probably make an argument that if you were to make that trade, you would probably bump Ramos to right field and put Tucker in left field. That would be my opinion, where he would be just a well above average defender. And Ramos has shown that he's a well above average right fielder in his kind of opportunities in right. So that would be where I would put them. But the most obvious fit with Kyle Tucker, and this is where I actually think Kyle Tucker is one of the best fits in all of baseball for the Giants, is he's a left-handed hitter. He's a power hitter. He's a bona fide number 3 hitter. There's not a ton of those guys that I look around baseball and I go, this is like a prototypical number 3 hitter. Kyle Tucker is on that list. It's a guy that doesn't strike out a bunch. He has elite contact rates, elite plate discipline, elite, pretty much if you just pull up his baseball savant page, which I'm going to share my screen right now so you can see what I'm referring to, it lights up the page. Everything, red is good for those of you that don't know. Like everything is top end in baseball. You pull up his from 2023 when he actually played the full season. 86th percentile chase, 86th percentile whiff, 94th percentile strikeout rate, and 85th percentile walk rate. That's insane plate discipline numbers. He still has a well above average, batted ball metrics. I go down to his profile, and it's not, this isn't a guy that sits there and hits just only fly balls and then strikes out a ton or anything like that. He actually, if you pull up his batted ball metrics, career 35.3% ground ball rate, which is good. 34.3% fly ball rate. So he hits the ball in the air almost as much as he hits the ball on the ground, but he also has it's a 24.7% line drive rate, which I love. And then he still uses the whole field. Almost a quarter of his balls he'll go the other way with, and he uses the middle of the field. And then he still pulls the ball, and he shows a good pull side power. You pull up his expected home runs. Of course, he's going to learn. He's going to lose home runs in Oracle Park. But if we just pull up his, if we just pull up his like overlay for home runs, this is over Oracle Park's dimensions. There's a lot that are going to clear that wall in right field. And then there's some that, clearly he's going to lose a few of these that are going to be off the wall in right center. Maybe a few get hung up in the wind and get caught, like, of course. But the other thing people got to remember, you don't play 162 games in Oracle Park. They are going to play 81 games on the road. And the fact that he is just a pure hitter in every capacity, I'm not as concerned about the home runs. I've never been somebody that overly concerns myself with just the home runs. What I would want out of him is if he can hit 25 out of the park, but then he still hits a ton of doubles and triples. And like I've said with Adames, more importantly, drives runners in. That is an excellent fit. And I look at how this lineup could take shape with a Kyle Tucker, where you can balance it out right, left, right, left, right, left, going down. And you could potentially in a year, if you extend him, maybe in a year, your lineup, you're going to have Lee, Ramos, and in whatever order, but Lee, Ramos, Kyle Tucker, Willie Adames, Bryce Eldridge, and Matt Chapman as your top 6. Like, that's a legitimate lineup that I think every Giants fan would be ecstatic with. Like, those are legitimate hitters. And then I didn't even throw in guys like Tyler Fitzgerald in there. I mean, there are guys, other guys still there that are really solid hitters that, potentially could be pretty dynamic players for the team, at that point. So you're looking at a pretty legit lineup. Now, I don't know how fast this is going to materialize or if it even does for, if Houston even does look to move him or actually pull the trigger on trading him. They have been a team that is willing to let guys just hit free agency. maybe a bit foolish, but they are a team that feels like their window is still open for winning World Series. And, they're not afraid to let a guy just ride it out into free agency in order to chase another title. We've seen it with George Springer. We've seen it with Alex Bregman now. And, I wouldn't be shocked, or we saw it with Carlos Correa, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see it with Kyle Tucker. Um, it's a team that's just willing to do it, and they'll just slap a qualifying offer on him, and if he walks, they'll get a little tiny bit of draft compensation out of it. So, they're not a team that necessarily is gonna feel the pressure to have to trade a guy. So, um, now as far as like timeline on this, like the reason that's important is because obviously there's that Corbin Burns domino out there right now, and then also Roki Sasaki as well. Um, if I'm the Giants and they land Corbin Burns, I've kind of mentioned to you guys, if you're going to go the route of losing 4 draft picks and 2 million in international bonus money, at that point you kind of just have to say screw it. And if you're blowing up the farm, you're blowing up the farm at that point, because you're not going to get the help you need from your farm system at that point. And if you do land Burns, like, I don't think you're quite a playoff team, but if you landed Burns and then turned around and traded for Kyle Tucker, I absolutely think this could be a 90-win team. Like, my opinion is their win. If I gave like an over/under on wins and losses with those two guys, in the fold, I'd put them like right around 89.5, which would put them right around the wild card. That what made the wild card last season was 89. So I think they would be right there with the potential, based on how a lot of these young guys progress, to be better or worse. And that's not even factoring in if Bryce Eldridge ends up being a special player or not. If he does, all of a sudden your upside, your ceiling just goes way up. And if he's not, I still think it's a really solid team. And then obviously you'd be looking at first base, but that just, there's so much room for improvement. Guys like Jung-Hoo Lee we don't really know what he is. He could end up improving. Guys like Harrison or Birdsong, if they're in the rotation, or even a Landon Roop, these are guys that, we've seen, some of, and everybody has kind of mixed feelings on these players, but they are young. A lot of them are 23 years old, and these are guys that could take huge steps forward. How does Ramos look from last year to this year? Same with Tyler Fitzgerald. Do these guys develop into dynamic players? Does Patrick Bailey take a step forward into being like a league average bat, where he's been kind of well below that the last couple of years, particularly in the second half? There's a lot of room for improvement with the young players. So if you can get a Corbin Burns and then make this trade for Kyle Tucker, this is a serious team that at least I would give a puncher's chance versus LA in a playoff series. They might not beat them. LA probably, it would clearly still be the favorite, but now you at least have a team that I feel could have a shot. Kind of similar to how like San Diego and Arizona, if they play LA in a playoff series, you're going to give them a shot. San Diego had LA on the ropes this year. It kind of fell apart, is what it is, but they had a shot against LA. And I would give the Giants that, and they would have room to continue growing. I mean, he's a 28-year-old player. Adames is 29. Corbin Burns will be in his age 30 season. These are guys in their prime, and you'd have a window of opportunity to try and continue adding. So now, what would it take to land a Kyle Tucker? Joel Sherman reported that they are kind of focused on, the Astros are kind of focused on corner infield and starting pitching. Well, the Giants do have Casey Schmidt, who is currently blocked at his primary position and potentially blocked at second base. And everybody here knows how I feel about Casey Schmidt. I really like him. I would love to see him get an opportunity. That said, if you have an opportunity to put him in a package and it helps you get over the hump, because he's not going to be the headlining piece. Like, that's the reality. Like, Kyle Tucker is a probably fringe top 25 player in all of baseball. So, Casey Schmidt's not going to be your headliner, but it might be beneficial to both parties. I could see Casey being very successful in Houston. He would get to play third base with Bregman exiting. He has, they obviously have the Crawford boxes there. He has the ability to go the other way. It's a very hitter friendly park, and the AL West as a whole is very hitter friendly. He get to play games in Sacramento, of all places, which he's obviously well, he has a lot of knowledge of playing in that park. And then you get to play in parks like in Anaheim, and then Seattle's not as pitcher friendly or hitter friendly, but um, Texas is obviously a pretty hitter friendly park. So most of the parks that you get to play in the AL West can be very helpful. And then you play third. So that's the big thing there. And then the Giants, they do have a ton of young starting pitching. Um, whether you want to look at former top prospects, guys that like Kyle Harrison, who was a top 20 prospect. You have a guy like Carson Wisenhunt, who, he fell out of the top 100 last year. The potential is still there, but he got all the way up into the top, I think, 70 prospects. And then you have Hayden Birdsong, who at the time of his promotion off of the top prospect list was a top 100 prospect. He was in the 90s and he was climbing. It's one of those that he went so fast that like he peaked at 98 or whatever and then fell off the list because he was in the majors. Had he gotten more time in AAA to, marinate and whatnot, he probably would have been a top 70-ish prospect as well. So the Giants have the pitching, the young pitching, to be enticing for Houston. So maybe you're looking at a package because I do think you're going to need to trade at least one top prospect. I would make Bryce Eldridge untouchable. I'm sorry, but I'm not trading him for a 1-year rental. But maybe you can look at moving a guy like Tibbs, who's I think around a top 80 prospect right now, Casey Schmidt, and one of your young pitchers. Or maybe they want, one of those 3 young pitchers and another guy like a Trevor McDonald or something like that. You may have to, like, it's not going to be cheap. Even with 1 year left on his deal, it's not going to be cheap. But you don't make this trade unless you are prepared to basically fork out whatever necessary to get him extended, which is going to be expensive. Now, the other question that would come down is, let's say you do land Burns and you make that trade for Kyle Tucker, and you're paying Burns 30-ish, 32 million a year, and then you're paying Kyle Tucker 16.7. Can the team get back under the competitive balance tax for a year? Frankly, I don't think they would care at that point. I think they would just pay the tax and do the repeater, and then get back under next season. But could you make that, could you make it back under the competitive balance tax? And, the one thing you have to keep in mind is if you do trade for Tucker, you have to imagine that Mike Yastrzemski is going to get traded. So that's $9.25 million. Maybe you have to eat a tiny bit of his deal, but you should be able to trade most of that deal. As we've talked about a ton, you have guys like Camilo Duvall, who I get Posey said they're not going to trade, but people say you're not going to trade players and then they trade them all the time. So you take it with a grain of salt, but you have Camilo Duvall. You could shed a few million there. You have not necessarily the guy I would move, but you have Taylor Rogers, who that's a guy that maybe you eat a couple million like you did with Stripling last year, but you might be able to get out of, 8-9 million of his deal. Obviously Lamont Wade Jr. is out on the roster. That's, roughly 5 million that you could save. So there are players that you could probably fairly easily move and at least get out of either their entire salaries or most of their salaries if they wanted to try and navigate back under. The other part, though, is if you do extend Tucker, maybe it's not possible to get under because part of trying to extend Tucker might involve, um, buying out this first year, the one that he's under arbitration, and raising his salary there. And it might raise the tax hit a bit overall. So, we'll see. But is it a move that I'd be willing to do? Especially if you get Burns? Absolutely. I think this is something the Giants should figure out what the cost would be. And if you can make that trade without including Eldridge, maybe you're adding guys like Matos and Luciano and whatnot as kind of added pieces to it, then I would do this in a flash. Kyle Tucker's he's simply one of the best position players in all of baseball. He's one of the best pure hitters in all of baseball. He is a difference maker on this team. So that's my thoughts. I want to hear what everybody has to say. So drop a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you think I'm insane or if you agree, if you think the Giants should be chasing after Kyle Tucker. Like I said, join us for our live show next or on this coming Friday. We may or may not have a special guest on that. Follow all my socials there. X, I'm most active on. We are going to try and start getting more of our shorts kind of posted to TikTok and Instagram. We've been kind of busy with haven't really got too many of the shorts up recently, but I'm going to try and, continue to get more of those up. And then as always, do please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and I will catch you all next time.